Hey everyone, Pete Calandra here. This is class review video number 2 for the Copeland School of Music Fall Semester 2021 Audio MIDI 2 class. And in this class, I basically am talking students through sample creation using Pro Tools built-in sampler, structure-free. But these techniques can be used on any sampler. And when school's in session, we have contact in all the workstation computers in the lab, but this is online this semester. I can't expect the students to be buying contact. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Give a thumbs up. For more content, please subscribe, and to be notified, ring that bell. Thank you so much, and let's get right into it. So this is class 2, and we're going to pick up with where we left off last week. So over this past week, I gave you some audio files, and you practiced editing them out into individual little events, figuring out what the pitches were, naming them properly, and exporting all those files. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to learn how to program them into sampler instruments. If this was regular time and we were meeting at Queens College in the lab, we would be doing this all in Contact. Contact is an expensive program, so I can't expect anybody to purchase it. And Pro Tools comes with something called Structure Free, which is a severely crippled version of actually what's a pretty good sampler structure. It hasn't gained widespread use, but it is fairly full-featured as far as samplers go, the full version. But for learning the basic programming techniques, Structure Free will be very usable for us. It'll work perfectly well. Now, one of the main criticisms I have with Structure Free is that they only limit you to 4 instances of it inside of a session. And so if you were going to create a track using your sampler instruments, you could only have 4 instances of it open, which seems to be a bit of like an unnecessary burden. I don't see why they just don't make it limitless. I mean, there's no reason to have it be so crippled. But be that as it may, we'll still get learning done, and there'll still be a lot of cool things we can do. So let's go to our view here, and I've got Pro Tools open. Now, the first thing we want to do is you want to take the folder with your edited samples. So let's say you've got that on your desktop, and you want to drag it in to the session folder so that it is all one package. Your Pro Tools session, all these other files, and your edited samples. And the reason for that is that Structure looks for a path to find the samples. And you're going to be sending this to me to look at. And Christy, your mic's on. Please keep it off. Structure is going to be looking for an absolute path. And if you send me a session folder without the edited audio files folder inside of it, the sample edited material, I won't be able to find it. What'll end up happening is I'll open it up and it will ask me to find it. I can do a really quick spotlight search and it finds it really quickly if you've done it correctly. Now, do we need to review the difference between the session folder and the session file? Let's take a quick review of that. So this folder here is the container that Pro Tools creates when it first opens up a session. This is the session folder, and it's typically populated with this .ptx file here, which is your Pro Tools session file. So session folder and session file. And then inside of the session folder are other folders with assets that Pro Tools needs to run that particular session. And they come and go depending upon whether stuff gets populated inside of this session. So in other words, if there are no audio files, when you close out of the session, this folder will disappear. If there are no bounced files, this will disappear. But this session file will always remain. So this is the container that has all of the assets that you need to run your session. I've gone over this quite a bit, and even towards the end of last semester in Audio MIDI 1, people were still kind of getting that messed up a little bit. And I want to make sure that you understand that hierarchy. Okay, so what I've got in my edited samples folder is just a few things. Oh, I have this additional file here, which I want to play around with to show you something later. But I've got some stuff that we didn't have last time. But I've got the Woodstock chimes. I've got the bass melodeon or melodica. I've got something else called motion pad. And I've got a piano that I recorded. And we're going to create 4 instruments with those. So inside of Pro Tools, the first thing I'm going to do is a Command-Shift-N, and I'm going to create 4 stereo instrument tracks. And then I'm going to go into the first one, and then I'll hold down the Option key and click on any of those names to unhighlight all of them. Then I'm going to go into my first insert column, right? So just as a refresher from last semester, right here in the upper right-hand corner here, there's this downward-facing triangle, which gives you the Edit Window View selector, right? So you can select all the things that you want to see. So make sure that you at least have your instrument and your inserts and your track color turned on. And in the insert column, I'm going to right-click, and just like putting Mini Grand, I'll go to Air Music Technology, and I'm going to put Structure Free into 1. And then what I'll do is, this is the GUI for Structure Free. This is where you load your patches in, and then this is where you do some editing. And it's very limited, but we can do a fair amount of work here. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go here to this rack, and I will right-click on this gold patch here, and I'm going to remove this patch, just like that. And now that's a blank Structure Free. And what I'll do is I'm going to hold the Option key down, click on this, and drag it down so that it just copies it right in to those other 4, and they should all be empty. All right? Now, I'm going to hide this just for a minute, and I'm going to open this up. This is my session folder, and I'm going to go to my edited samples. I'll double click there, and let's just start with the Woodstock chimes, okay? And I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to select all of these. So I'll highlight the first one, Command A, it selects all of them, and I'm going to click and drag them right into this patch area here. Just drag them in like this. And then another dialog is going to show up, right? Now I'll zoom in on this so you can see this. And notice that I've got it set up like I told you. I've got the name, underscore, and then the pitch of the sample. So when you first open it up, it's going to look something like this. What you want to do is right in this column here where it says Set Root Key, you're going to click on From Name, and then you're going to go into this next column, and you'll click on that, and you see how it has prefix and note. So the way we've got this set up is the name is the prefix, and then you have the note. Okay? You have the prefix, which is the name, and then in parentheses, the note, which we've done with the underscore. So you're going to select prefix and note, and then you're going to go here to where it says Map to Key Zone. You're going to click on By Root Key. And then you're going to do this by root. Well, actually, you'll go fill down, right? So what that means is that from every pitch, it will fill in the notes chromatically by stretching the sample down. And that's always preferred in sampling rather than stretching a sample up in pitch. It always sounds better to take an instrument, a sound, in a sampler and stretch it down to fill in the notes. So, in other words, we have D4 is our highest pitch, and then our next highest pitch is B3. So what will happen is that the sampler will take D4 and it will stretch it down to D flat 4, C4, and then you will get your B3 sample, which is up here. Then it will stretch that down to B flat. Then you have your A3. That will be stretched down to A flat. And then you'll have your G3. And then that particular sample will be F sharp 3, F3 to E3. And then that will be stretched down to E flat 3 to D3. And then from D3, it'll just stretch it all the way down the rest of the keyboard. All right, so that's how that'll work. And let me just show you. So I'll just go hit OK. All right. And there's a little keyboard here. Let me just center this and zoom in again. And if I click on this, you'll hear some sounds. But hear how it stops like that? So let me just zoom in a little further. Let's get this set up like this. Okay, so what happened was that I've got D4, which is this pitch here, as one sample. That sample is being pitch stretched down so that you can play it on this pitch and this pitch. Then the next sample is B3. That's playing the B3 sample, and because we've done that downward fill, it's stretching, it's duplicating and stretching it down so that when you play this B flat here, it's playing the B sample, but it's pitch stretched it down to B flat. The same with the A, it's A and A flat, the G, then it does G flat, F, and then there's the E, does E flat, then D, does all the other pitches all the way down. All right? So that's pretty easy, and then the next thing we're going to want to do is right here, so notice I've just clicked and dragged to the left, and I'm going to delete that and call WDST chimes rather than write Woodstock out. There's a radio station up here called WDST Radio Woodstock up in Woodstock, New York. It's right on Route 28 between Kingston and Woodstock. Okay, now let me also name this track WDST chimes and record enable this, and then I can play that from the keyboard. But notice how when I let go, it stops. What we need to do is create something called the envelope of a sound. The envelopes for synthesized sounds, of which this is a method of synthesis, was created by Dr. Moog. And I've told you guys this in the past, that Dr. Moog went to Queens College as an undergraduate in the 1950s as a physics major, and he took music classes in the music department. And my teacher at Queens College, Professor Berkowitz, had him as a student in the 50s. And Dr. Moog went up to Cornell to do his graduate and doctoral work in physics. But he was always, he knew how to play violin a little bit, and he was always interested in creating musical instruments. And he paid for his college career by creating theremin kits. Theremin is, you ever see that instrument that has the two wires and the person puts their hands in between it and moves it around like this, and it changes pitches and makes an eerie sound? That was a That's an early synthesizer created by somebody from Russia named Leon Theremin. And Bob Moog created kits, and he sold them mail order to pay for college and living expenses and everything while he was living up in Ithaca, which is where Cornell is, up the southern tier of New York State. And after he finished, he got his he worked with a guy named Herb Deutsch, who lives in Long Island and taught music at Hofstra for a long time. And they worked on creating synthesizers, and they had this big modular synthesizer, and Herb started playing it and thought that you needed something to be able to shape the sound over time, much like an acoustic instrument. So Bob came up with this thing called the envelope. And envelopes consist of, the typical basic envelope consists of 4 parameters. 3 of these parameters are time-based, and 1 of them is just a level. So the 4 parameters of an envelope are attack, decay, sustain, and release. So A, D, S, R. And when we did structure programming last semester, and there are some of you that didn't take Audio MIDI 1 yet, so you didn't get some of this stuff, which is one reason why I'm repeating it. We talked a little bit about that when we were programming in Expand 2. Last semester we were making custom sounds in Expand 2. I talked about playing around with the attack and the release and a little bit, but that particular piece of software is also crippled because whoever programmed the particular sound also decided which parameters of that sound that you could affect. Structure Free has a complete envelope generator, which is good. So attack, and if you see something that's called an ADSR, that's the acronym for an envelope generator. So A, attack, D, decay, S, sustain, and R, release. So attack is the amount of time it takes for a signal to go from no volume to full volume. Decay is the amount of time it takes for a sound to go from full volume to the sustained volume. And sustain is the amount of is the level that the note sustains at when you're the volume that the note sustains at when you're holding the key down. And release is the amount of time it takes for the note to go from the sustained volume to no volume after you let go of the note. Right? Attack, the amount of time it takes for a sound to go from no volume to full volume. Decay, the amount of time it takes to go from full volume down to the sustained level. Sustain is just a volume that maintains for as long as you hold the key down. And release is the amount of time it takes for the sound to go from the volume that it's been sustaining to no volume at all when you release the note. So this sounds odd because it's got no envelope. So let me zoom in a little bit for those of you on iPads, iPhones, and 13-inch laptops. So this is our rack with our patch in it. This is our browser. Over here, we can, this is where we edit the sound. So there's very few parameters that we can edit here. We can transpose. I'll come back to this once we do the envelope, and we'll look at these. You can transpose these up an octave, down, up many octaves, down octaves, semitones. You can fine tune the pitch if it's a little out of tune. And we don't want to fine tune it. We just want it at 0. You could change the pitch bend, which is the lever on the side of the keyboard, the number of steps, and then the polyphony, 32 is fine. And the current, that just lets you know, like if I play 1 note, see that that's the number 1. If I play 4 notes, it turns to 4. The key range, this is the C-2. This is like the fullest range of the keyboard. So you can set things up that only play in a small range. And then mono mode, we don't have to worry about this in glide. That's how the notes slide back and forth between them when you play one and move into the next. But what we want to do right now is we want to go to, this is edit 1, and you see up here the yellow, it's yellow. And then click on edit 1, and here we've got our filter, our amplifier, and 2 envelopes, one for the filter and one for the amplifier. And we want to work on the amplifier. So we've got here a 5-stage envelope generator. They've added hold, which I don't know why they've got that, but because you've got sustain. So watch what happens as I take this slider and push it up towards the top. You see how it fades in? And then if you option click on this, it goes back to 0. So in other words, if I'm all the way down here, I hold the option key and click, it pops back to 0. So this is a sharp sound. So we're going to just play it. The attack is fine, and the decay and the sustain is fine. But we want it to hold after we let go of the note. So watch what happens when I push the release up. A little too much. And notice it doesn't play above this top note, right? Which is fine. There's plenty of notes from here. It doesn't have to be the whole length of the keyboard. That's not really necessary. So now, let's go back. I'm going to go over these things here in a second. Oh, well, let's talk about the amplifier. Right, so I'm soft, hitting the keyboard hard, and not a lot of volume difference. So you play around with this. See, I can get that softer. And if I move it all the way here, so that's at minus, no matter what I do, it doesn't change any volume. So this is a parameter that you have to play around with. Now, let's go back to this other page here, and let's move the octave up 1 octave. See, it just moves it down the keyboard, but it doesn't change where the cutoff, like, it doesn't add any notes up on the top. So I don't, that's something that you'll have to play around with to see how you like it, or I could just put it down an octave and then that might be more comfortable for me to play. Now, the pitch bend, whoops, 2. So I'm just pushing the pitch bend wheel at the far left hand. So it's going up 2 semitones or down. And you could do it so that the up goes maybe up a minor third, and the down goes an octave, right? So you could do. And what you'll see is that keyboard players who play progressive metal rock, like in Dream Theater and bands like that, Jordan Rudess, he always has his pitch bends, the up goes either up a minor third or a second, and down an octave, so that he can do like dive bombs that guitarists do with vibrato, with like a Floyd Rose vibrato whammy bar on their guitars. So you could play around with these things. I would just leave them set at 2 myself personally. That's fine. You're not going to do much work with pitch bend probably. You might adjust this. So now, the only way to save this, unfortunately, is to save it with the session. So as you're working, you want to Command S and save as you're working. So if Pro Tools crashes, you won't lose your work. So let's go back to Edit 2 and let's talk about the filter. Well, first of all, I can do it here first. So if we've done this a little bit last semester. So if I add a one-band filter, right, an EQ3 one, and I click on this, this gives us a high-pass filter. And you see what it's doing is it's chopping off all the low frequencies. And then you can adjust the frequency here. If I click on this one, this is a low-pass filter. It does the opposite. It allows low frequencies and it attenuates the high frequencies. And then the Q is the slope. So if I move this down to 6 decibels for octave, you can see that the curve becomes more gradual. And then 24 is very steep. Now, there's one parameter that's missing from here in order to make it a synthesizer filter, and that is something that's called resonance. And what resonance does is it takes the cutoff frequency, which is this dot here, and it emphasizes it. It adds more volume to it. So if this had a resonance control, this line would go across here, and right here would jump up sharply and then come down, right? So, you know, it just adjusts the volume of the cutoff the frequencies around the cutoff frequency, and that's a very interesting effect. And I'll show you that in a second. So let me just take this out. And if we go back to structure free and we go right here, it says it has a filter. So this is good if you want to do some additional sound shaping with your samples. So you click here and you've got all these choices, right? So LP stands for low pass. It does not stand for Lenny Pickett or Latin percussion. Lenny Pickett is the saxophone player on Saturday Night Live, and he was originally in Tower of Power, for those of you who want to know what that is. BP stands for band pass, not petroleum company. And that what a band pass does is it sort of makes like a bell on your EQ curve, and it allows whatever's inside that bell to pass, and it attenuates the frequencies outside that bell. High pass attenuates the low frequencies and allows the high frequencies to pass. And then it's got, I guess these are high quality. I'm not quite sure. Probably, but we can just stay here. So you could try, I would say to try LP12 as your first attempt. And let's play the sound. And if I turn this cutoff frequency to the left, you hear it gets duller, the sound. Right? Now, that might be a bit much. And if I take the resonance and pull that up so that it gets more into a positive numbers, you can see how I could change the sound. Now, if I bring this cutoff frequency down, you see I'm adding some additional metallic pitches in there. Right, so we've gone from our little simple bell to a very complex sound. Now, if you do 12/24, it's going to be even more drastic of a... And then you can play around with the envelope. Right. So this is changing. Right, there we go. So you get a little wah at the beginning. So that's changing the envelope of the filter. It sounds more like steel drums now, right? So if you want to, you can play around with these things. You don't have to. I'm going to turn it off and just go back to our Woodstock chimes. So that's our first sound done. The second one, I'm going to go to my oak piano. So the oak piano, what is the oak piano? So about 6 years ago, we were considering moving to the Bay Area. And we spent we did a whole road trip across country one summer. We were out in California for about 6 or 7 weeks. And then we came back, and then each one of us, my wife and I, we went on she went for a week and I went for a week, and we looked at houses. And I went to look at a house in Oakland, which was very nice, in a really nice area of Oakland. I think it's called Oakmore. And in the garage, they had an ancient piano, that upright piano that looks like it must have been 100 years old. And I had in my little knapsack, I had a Zoom video recorder with a stereo microphone on it. So I immediately went over and I started playing the piano. It had like really interesting character to it. Didn't sound like a great piano, but had interesting character to it. And then I spent 10 minutes and I just recorded a bunch of pitches on the piano. Not every pitch, but just a bunch of pitches. I came back to my studio. The whole piano was a minor third flat, so I had to pitch correct everything. And then I came up with these samples. So what I'm going to do is select all of these and drag these into here. And notice that it has kept the same distribution from the last one, except from here. You have to, again, prefix, note. I hope this is right. It looks like I named this differently. Oh, I've got my initials there. Well, hopefully this will work. I might have to go back and re-edit those samples names, but let's try it. Great. So the release needs just a little bit of release after the note goes. Oh, wrong one. This one right here. Oh, I'm blocking the view. Let's get me out of there. And then I can also, it seems a little soft, I could turn the volume of that up here. And it's an octave to, yeah, you can see that it doesn't sustain for very long, and you can hear the mechanism coming up. Let's add a little velocity sensitivity. And then what I'm going to do is go here and transpose everything up an octave. And that's in the right pitched key now. And that's perfectly fine the way it is. And I'll name this Oak Piano, as in Oakland. And then save. All right, so, and then I have to name the track here, Oak Piano. So that's the basic way of programming these samples. This is like really fundamental stuff. Sampling can become, if you use a program like Contact or ESX in Logic, and I think it's called Mach 5 in Digital Performer, and Ableton has a sampler. You can do really incredibly detailed programming. You have to understand the basics first. So your assignment for next week is twofold, right? The first thing I want you to do is to program take your edited samples and program 4 instruments from each one of them using the techniques we just went over here inside of Pro Tools. And then write just like a 30-second little piece of music, just using those 4 instruments. Okay? It can be anything. Just get used to using them as musical instruments. So that's your assignment for the first part of your assignment for next week. We're going to get into the second part in a second, but is there any questions on what we've done so far? No?
Yeah, actually.
Who's this?
Troy, the new guy.
Okay, Troy.
Thank you for having me. Tried working on this earlier, and I've got my shortcut set up. I've got the AZ key clicked, but no matter how many times I press the shortcut, it will not export.
What shortcut are you talking about?
Command Shift K.
Right. Are you highlighting the tracks?
Yep.
Like highlighting the audio files.
Yeah.
And you're doing is it Option Shift K or Command Shift K?
I looked it up 3 times. It's Command.
Yeah. So I'd have to see what's going on with your computer. So we'll have to do that like right after class. All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. And then Jinhee, I got your email about the microphone. I'll have to show you that when we do our private session.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I have to show you how to set up an aggregate audio device inside. You have Mac, right?
Yes.
Mac. Yeah. We have to set up an aggregate audio device inside of your audio MIDI setup.
Thank you.
No worries. We did that the first semester we were online because students didn't have we didn't have the recording kits, and students had they had video recorders and little Zoom stereo recorders that graduate students did. So I taught them how to make those into little USB microphones, which was I had to figure that out. So it was good for me to figure that out. Okay, so great. So I'm trying to think of which way to go right now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go back here. And the next thing I want you to do is to start to create your own samples. Around your apartments, out in the street, there are sounds all around you. And those sounds can become the basis for creating an instrument that you can use. So I played you a drum kit last week that I made from cardboard boxes and other things that I had in my apartment when I was living in the city. Let me just show you some other things as examples. When I was living on the Upper West Side, we had a really great hallway, and I made some audio recordings. Those I've used in film scores, right? And I've programmed them into Contact, and I can play them inside of Contact on my keyboard, and they're as good as any professional slam, big percussion slam that you can get. And I recorded that with a little Zoom handheld recorder in the hallway. I was just slamming the door open and closed. There was a fire extinguisher in the hallway. Right? So, all right. So let's take this bell, right? And if I drag this into here, and Oops, it'd be good if I record enabled this track. Right, so I've got that. It's a bizarre sound, but it could be useful for... Really cool, right? So that's a fire extinguisher, and I took a drumstick or maybe a spoon or a fork, and I hit it, and I recorded it. I figured out what the pitch was, and now I've got that. I can make an instrument out of that, right? If I were to take... hallway clap, right? Just drag that in here. And I'm going to need a long release. Right? That's like a really great percussion sound. The reverb in the hallway is tremendous, natural reverb. So I didn't need to do anything to it. I forget what this is. Yeah, just a strange sound. So, you know, I've gone around and I've recorded a bunch of different sounds that I've used to make contact instruments, and I want you to do the same thing. Part of this exercise is technical, so again, learning how to program, record, and edit sounds, but it's also training your ear to listen and look at things and think about, like, what can I use that sound for? There are all sorts of natural sounds that occur that can create really interesting sources to create instruments with that you can't find anywhere else. So I'm going to go through that process right now with you. One way, and then I'll do it a second way. So the first way is going to be with the phone. What? Okay, so we all have phones, and our phones all have like the voice memo app. Oh, continue. Right, your voice memo app. So I want to record something with the phone. Now, you remember the microphone for the phone is down at the bottom here. Now, you can get, I have a stereo microphone that plugs into this lightning port made by, I think it's made by Shure, the same people that make the SM57. And it's pretty good. You know, I've recorded stuff with it, but you guys might not have that. So I'm showing you, like, you know, guerrilla, jungle, sort of guerrilla recording techniques. So you use your phone and you use your voice memo app. So got a little glass here and a hot rod drumstick. Right? You can hear that there's a sound to that, a pitch. So turn this on. No, so great. Something there is pretty good. So I turn this off, and then I'm going to edit this one here. Cancel. So, right. So, like, I can rename this. So I'll call this glass hit 1. Great. And then if I click on that, you can select it there, right? You can select it. This is hard to see. And then there's an option to move. So I'm going to click on the word move. and I'm going to name it sample. Save. Okay, great. Sorry, too much stuff to think about. So to the left, there are 3 dots. You click on the 3 dots and you get this new menu right there, right? And it says share. So I can share this, and I'm just going to email it to myself. I'm not on Wi-Fi. I'm hardwired into my internet. So I'm just going to email this to myself. I made a recording of that, and let's go back here and let's go to my mail. And we've got this, and I'm going to download this. And Command-Shift-I, and I'm going to import audio, and I'm going to go to my downloads folder, and there's Glass Hit, and then I'll just convert it. Open. Destination folder, and new track at session start. Great, and there's my Glass Hit, right? So it's a little noisy, but we're going to take care of that by editing. So the first thing I need to do is to figure out what pitch that is. It's somewhere between C and D. We're just, for our time being, we're going to just edit this out like this. And in here, and we'll delete this, and we'll do a fade out, right? So you just slide across there and hit the F key. Great. And then Command-Shift-K. And I'm going to choose my edited samples, new folder, Glass Hit. And cancel this because I didn't name it correctly. So let's name this Glass Hit _ C3. And then again, Command-Shift-K, Murray the K. I've got my destination directory export. And then let's open up this guy here and let's get that in. Hey, where'd it go? Let's try that one more time. Oh, it went into the motion pad. No, we don't want it in there. We want it into Glass Hit. Okay, great. Now we should get cooking. And then let's add a little envelope. Right, so I've got, you know, see how quick and easy that is? And I've got a little instrument there, and I'm the only person who has it. Okay, let's take this one step further, though. I'm going to take this sound. Oh, get it close to the attack. That's really sloppy on my part. Okay. I'm going to take this, and I want to leave it the way it is, but I'm going to copy this, and I'm just going to paste it here. And then, well, I don't really even need to do that. Let's do this. We can sound design this and change this around and make an unusual sound. So what do I mean by that? Well, there's one of 2 ways that we can do this. We can insert an effect that will change this sound and process it, or we can use something called Audio Suite. Audio Suite is destructive. Let's wait before I teach you how to use that. Let's do this really simply. So let's say I take this and I want to add a little bit of beef to the sound, right? So I'm going to go to an insert and we're going to just use our Air Music technology. And right, we've got, you should have all of these different kinds of plugins. So distortion. Let's see what that sounds like. So this comes up with this GUI, and let's get this in the middle and I can go through the controls. So the drive is how much the sound is driven. It'll add all sorts of harmonics to it. The output is the output level. And you may want to make this softer depending upon the sound. Might get too loud, too hot. It might start overdriving Pro Tools. So these are just some tone shaping devices. And the mode, hard, soft, and rap. And the one that you really want to work with is this mix. So you could have just a little bit of distortion by turning the mix down, or a lot of distortion. So I'm going to highlight this, right? And then right, so this right here, Command-Shift-L, brings in loop playback. I don't have the transport here, which is the way I normally do it. And you can see the transport has the circle around it over here, which is probably hard to see on your laptop. So that's getting a little hot. So what I'm doing is I'm just playing around with the controls, right? So it was really harsh in the high frequencies. So I took the high frequency cut and let's see what this DC bias does. Interesting, right? So what happens if I do rap? And what if I turn the mix down? Now, I'm keeping a look on my output meter here, and I want to make sure it doesn't go more than like 2/3 of the way up when it's playing at the loudest point. And maybe I want to make it a really short sound, right? So maybe I'll take some of that tail off and do a fade there. Whoops. Yeah. So that's one thing I can do. What else can I do? Let's see. No, that might be enough. So let's, right? Option, Command-Shift-K, K, and then I want to name this. So glass hit, and then I'll add DIST for distortion, and clean this name up. And I'll hit OK, and then Command-Shift-Murray the K. Structure, sampler, choose, glass hit, great. Pop that in there. And let's take this guy here and let's remove this. So I'll remove the patch. Glass hit distortion, drag it in there. Oh, whoops. I'm sorry. My mistake. I made a mistake. So you got this here, right? So what you want to do is you want to commit this. So you right click and you go down to commit. So let me show you. So I right click on the name here and I commit that. And you want to do, we went over this last semester a little bit. I'll be going over this much more, but the source tracks, you want to do nothing because you just want to leave it alone. And then you'll insert it after the last selected track. And then it's rendering that. And then this now is, just have to rename this .wav. Great. And then this you would export. Okay, great. Now let's go here. Let's get rid of this. And let's navigate back to our desktop, go to our folder, and let's double check. Yeah. So I've made that sort of distorted bit. Now, the other way to do that is for you guys to use your recording kits that you've got, or any home, if you've got a USB microphone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use for right now this microphone. And so let me mute it for a second because I'm going to move things around and I don't want there to be, funny noises coming into your headphones. So I'm just going to mute. You won't hear me talking. And if you've got questions, you could certainly answer them. All right, so I've got my acoustic guitar here. And I don't want to sample the entire acoustic guitar. That would take me forever. But let's say I wanted to sample the harmonics on the guitar, right? Which would be... So what we need to do in Pro Tools is Command-Shift-N. Whoops. Oh no, what did I do? Oh no. Okay, great. Too many technical things. It's driving me crazy. Okay, so I'm in Pro Tools, and I'll do Command-Shift-N for one new mono track, and I'm going to name this GTR for guitar. And I need to set up my input. I know that in my audio interface, it's plugged into the first one, so that's interface number 1. So I just switched that. And then you could see that I'm getting a signal there. Now you're hearing me in double, so let me fix that. So now you're just hearing me regularly. Okay, so I'm just not going to teach you right now how to mic acoustic guitar, but basically I'm getting the microphone close enough, and I'm looking at the level, making sure that it's not overloading the input. That would be this guy here, and it's not. So let me make this a little bit bigger. So I want to turn off the metronome. I don't want to hear a click. And I'm just going to put my playback head here, and I'll hit 3 on my, or you guys would be Command spacebar. Oh wait, hold on. I don't need to have this here. And you got to be really quiet when you do this. I hit the wrong one. Okay, so those are some guitar harmonics. That's one thing. Now, if you're programming guitar, one thing that's really difficult to get when you're programming guitar is strumming. Right? Because that's really hard to get the upstroke and the downstroke. So what you can do is when you're getting up on the downstroke, which is Parliament Funkadelic, this is another trick I'll teach you. You can get a friend of yours that plays acoustic guitar, and you could play those cowboy chords, the open chords, and I'm just going to do it with the G chord. And you can play a downstroke and then an upstroke, like this. Then the upstroke. One more time. All right, let me do that whole bit again. Okay. What else do I have that I can make a sampler instrument with? Well, I've got this sort of semi-kunga drum here. You could have a can, a metal can that the top of you can hit, right? So I'm going to do this, and I want to somebody had a question about this. I think it was Pedro, and this will answer that question. Oh, come on. Great. All right, so I've got this all going on the guitar track. So if I just played, right, that's mechanical if I only did one of them, but if I did a hit here, a bunch of different hits. I can map those so that each one of those hits takes up 2 or 3 pitches on the keyboard, and it doesn't matter what the actual pitch is. You just want to be able to play from the keyboard, and that can give you a little bit more convincing performance. So let me record some of that in. And again, this is something you can do with your phone as well. Okay, I'm going to mute the mic for a second, and then I'll move everything back into position. All right, let's also change the view. So let's go back to our harmonics. Now, if I were to just play these back, you'll notice that that one is louder. You see how the waveform has a larger amplitude there? So you want to volume balance these things. So I'm going to just use tab to transient just to quickly and then you'll notice that at the bottom left of each one of these little clips, I can delete this, I don't need this. It's got a volume control. And that's your, what's called, excuse me, clip-based gain. And basically, I'm going to eyeball it and volume match it that way. So this one's softer. Let me look at the meter. That's a good volume. This one's a little too hot. So instead of making this one louder, I'm going to make this one softer. Great. This one's a little too soft. I'll make that a little louder. And notice how, even though this one looks softer, because it's a higher pitch, it sounds about the same volume. So I just have to do little adjustments. Okay, I don't like that one, so I'm not going to use it. Now, let me move these so that they've got a little separation between them. And let's do little fade outs at the end of these. And actually, let's get a little bit more room here. I'll move those later. And then I can leave a lot of space between these notes. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is I'm going to sound design this. All right, so I'm going to take, I'll go to my Avid folder, and I'm going to take Deverb, and I'm going to go mono to stereo, so that this way I am taking this mono track and I'm going to make it into stereo. I'm going to turn the gain all the way up. Now, we haven't done much work with this. All right. So this is the basic stock Avid reverb plugin. The plate reverbs sound pretty good, so I tell people to stick with that. But let me just give you a quick tour around the GUI. So at the top, they've got the different kinds of algorithms: hall, like concert hall, church, plate reverb, which I think I've explained what that was last semester. A plate reverb was one of the first artificial reverbs. It's basically a metal plate, a large metal plate that's suspended inside of a box, and there are transducers hooked up to it. One of those transducers sends audio, and that audio excites the metal on the sheet and it vibrates, and then the other transducer acts like a microphone and picks up those vibrations, and it sounds like reverb, and they blend that back into the track. That's it in a nutshell. I'm going to be going over some of these things I'm going over today. I'm giving you just the Reader's Digest condensed version. I'm certainly going to be spending more time going through reverb and delay and all this stuff. And we did go through some of this stuff last semester, but I am going to go over it in more depth when we mix our first track, which will be after we do our sampler piece. Okay, so rooms, 2 different rooms, ambient and nonlinear. And then we've got 3 different sizes: small, medium, and large. And then down here, we've got other controls. So if I change, the decay is how long it takes for the reverb to stop. So it's like release on a envelope. If I see it set at 4.5 seconds for large, if I hit small, it's preset to 2.2, and medium is somewhere in the middle. We can fine tune that by just clicking and dragging on this dial here. And then pre-delay is the amount of time until the reverb sounds. So you could play a sound, and then the reverb would come in if you turn the pre-delay up. And let's not get into diffusion. That's a little bit much. But the high frequency cut, this is like a low pass. It's kind of like a low pass filter, although it has a low pass filter, but it just cuts the frequencies, and you can adjust that here. So it attenuates the volumes on the high frequencies, and that actually works well with reverbs. You don't want them to be too bright, although plate reverbs are generally bright. So let's, we can also, up here there are presets. So I'm going to pick a preset, a vocal plate, right? And then again, what I want you to do is this gain knob gets down to -4, bring it all the way up to 0. And then we're going to turn our mix. This is how much wet and dry signal there is. So when you pull this to the right, there's more of the dry signal. And when you, to the left, there's more of the dry signal. And when you pop it to the right, there's more of the wet signal. So we're going to just bring it down, and let me play that sound. A little bit more. Let's go to one of the lower ones. Let's make it even more ambient. Okay, so that's interesting. Let me zoom back. So I'm going to leave that in the chain. And then, you know, just experiment around with some of these plugins in the Air Music Technology folder. Just, they're all, you know, you can Google what these things do. But let's say if I wanted to do a filter gate, I can add a rhythmic value to that sound. So just like, in other words, if I just select one of the presets and I play that, which is kind of cool, right? A cool effect. But that sort of locks you into that rhythm. It's only rhythm. It only is rhythm locked to the rhythm of your sequencer when it's actually inserted here. But if you actually make that into an audio file, it'll always be that speed. So what if I wanted to add some more? So let's say I add something called an ensemble, which is kind of like a chorusing effect, which is basically taking the sound, doubling it, and throwing one of them out of tune slightly. Let's see, one new message. No, I haven't seen that, Claudia. I'll look that up, though. Seth Everman. So let's just do something that's ultra stereo. And then what I'll add to that is I'm going to go to something called Mod Delay, which is Mod Delay 3, which is an Avid plugin. And I like this plugin. And I'm going to add some delay, and I'm going to turn it down so that it's not up all the way. And then I'm going to have two different delay times, one on the left and one on the right. So I just adjust these here. I'm going to go over this plugin in detail and then turn the feedback up. Great. Okay, so I've got something here, and I'm going to go with this and make an instrument of this. So instead of committing, what I'm going to do this time is Command-Shift-N and add a new stereo audio track and call this GTR Harmonics Sound Design. I'll just call it Guitar Harmonics SD for sound design. Create. And what you need to do, what I want to do is take these that are being processed and record them on this track. So the way to do that is to route the output of the guitar track here to a bus. And you just go to the first open one, which is bus 1 and 2. And then in the this one right here, we want to take the input and route that to the bus that we just set up. So in other words, the output of this track is being fed to the input of this track. So it's like I'm taking a cable from this track and plugging it into this track. So now if I play this guitar harmonic thing, you don't hear anything. You see the meters moving, nothing's happening. Well, you have to record enable this and hit this I button so your input monitoring, and now you can see it's coming through there. So basically, I'm just going to start right here, and I'm going to highlight all this, and we're just going to hit 3, and we're just going to record and let it happen. Let me speed this up a little bit. And I'll do this here. And I'm just listening to see when it ends. And I'm no longer hearing it, so I'll stop it. And here. And I'm no longer hearing that. Great. Okay, so now our next step is to just double check. So it's a little soft, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key, click on the first one, hold the Shift key down, and click on the last one. They're all highlighted. And if I hold down Control and Shift, if I hold down Control and Shift and push the upward facing arrow, whoops. Let me zoom in. Right, so Control and Shift and the upward facing arrow. I'm increasing the clip gain by a half a dB on each one. So you see that they all go up together. So that's a really cool trick. Let me show you that again. So I'm going to click on the first one, hold the Shift key down, click on the last one, so they're all highlighted. Hold down Control and Shift, right, on the keyboard, and push the upward facing arrow, and they're all going up in half dB increments. So I'm going to pop that up about 6 dB each. Still a little soft, so I'm looking up here. I want this to be about 2/3 of the way up. And I'm going to get more specific about output as we go into the future, but for right now, this is a good start. So I'm going up 10 dB. I think I'm going to go with that. So I remembered that this was these A, E, A, D, G, and B. E, A, D, G, and B, right. So I have to name these. So guitar harmonics SD, so this is E2. I'm going to copy this, select and copy, paste, and this is A2, A2 Brutus. Then this gets into the next harmonic, so that would be D3. This would be G3. And then this would be B3, not to be confused with niacin or an organ. And then Command-Shift-K, we're going to export these. Oh, I made a mistake. Command-Shift-K, choose my destination directory. GTR harmonics. SD. Boom. Okay, great. So let me mute these tracks. And let's open up structure here. Let's navigate to that guitar harmonics SD and drag these guys into here. Prefix and note by root key and fill down. I'm your host tonight, fill down. No, so you fill down, and then let me record enable this. It's a little soft. I can bring up my master. Let's go to our browser, to our edit 2 and turn up our release. And I've got a really cool. Now, if I want to do some more sound designy stuff, I can have a slower attack. Let me turn up the, and let's get a little. The tack's too long. Too short. Somewhere in the middle. And then if you wanted to add some filter to that, maybe I put the low pass, turn the cutoff down, and turn the resonance up. Right, and then I just named this GTR SD, and then save my session. And so you see how you can take perfectly normal acoustic instruments and change them into things that are really unique, just using a little creativity. Let's do the one more bit. I know I've got those drum hits there. I want to show you this thing with the strumming really quickly. Okay, great. So this is, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just playing a G chord, right? So if I want to get strumming, I can't be playing it like this. I have to alternate. So the upstroke and the downstroke and then the upstroke. And then I can do rhythmic patterns. So this is guitar, strum. And then this, maybe I'll make this G2, right? And I'll just write down. Copy all that. Okay. Guitar strum up. And then we'll make this G3. And then let's export those. Command. Let's choose our directory. Great. And let's we've got one more instrument. Let's see, this is a GTR SD. We've got one more of our 4 instruments left. From prefix and note, fill down. Okay, what happened? Let's get rid of this. Let's try that again. Oh, do I have too many of these open? 3, 4. Prefix and note. Ah, here we go. And then let's add an envelope to this. Right, so if I had played this downstroke a little bit tighter, I could... And then you could do all your different chords, right? You could sample all your different chords. Like in other words, I played this upstroke and it should have been, so it's I get more of that, but you can play all these open chords and program them out like this. And if you're a keyboard player and you want to get something that sounds a little bit more authentic when you're doing acoustic guitar, so I'm actually going to do a tutorial on this at some point. You could do something like that and, you know, just have that for yourself and then eventually replace it with a real guitar player. But it gives you your demos a much more a realistic sounding thing rather than trying to play that with individual sample notes. Okay, so now the first part of the assignment for next week, right, is to create, I'm going to just turn the AC on. It's getting a little stuffy in here. Don't want my cameras to overheat. Is to create 4 sampler instruments from what you edited for this week and then write a short little ditty, 30 seconds long with them. And now start to record and edit sounds that you hear. You could be walking down the street. I had students that were in the subway. I'm not recommending you get in the subway. I'm just telling you that what was done in the past. And they recorded the sounds of subway doors opening and closing. And one person did that and made an instrument out of it. It was really interesting. The sound of a jet going overhead from LaGuardia. That could be a really obnoxious sound. But, you know, maybe just think about when you're walking down the street, like things that make sound. What are they and how can you capture them? Capture them in your phone, email them to yourself, and bring them into Pro Tools. If you've got stuff around your apartment and you've got your audio interface set up, which I haven't really gone over yet. Those of you that took Recording Studio Fundamentals, I did go over that with you last year at this time, so you might remember that. And if you haven't gotten your recording kit yet, you have to fill out the form and pick that stuff up because we're going to be recording live audio before you know it and mixing it at home. And maybe like we can collaborate with each other this semester, which I couldn't get going last year, but I'm hoping I can get that going this year, this semester. So get started, record. I'm not going to put a limit, but record a bunch of stuff because not everything you record is going to turn out the way you like it. You know, I'm an avid photographer. I love taking photographs. I've got nice cameras. And when I had film cameras, I was always loath to take a picture because it was expensive to record, to develop a piece of film and print it out, and then your thing's out of focus, right? And then the phone came along, and I don't have to worry about it if it's out of focus or I don't like it. I just delete it. And then once the digital cameras became really good, it works. So I can take a lot of photographs, but if I take 15 or 20 photographs, maybe 2 or 3 are decent and worthy to be posted somewhere or done more work on. So record a bunch of instruments. You're going to write a piece with your own sampler instruments. That'll be part of this assignment, and you'll need 4 instruments at the end of the day. But gather some sounds, get them in the computer, and start working on them. So what you'll hand in for next week will be the piece that you write with 4 of the sounds that you edited. Right. So what was due today, you'll take those sounds, you'll create 4 sampler instruments with it, and you will write a piece with just those 4 instruments. That's about 30 seconds long. So that's due for next week. And remember, very important for you to remember that your edited samples have to be inside of your Pro Tools session folder. Otherwise, I won't be able to access them. Okay, my friends? So if there's any question on that, let me know. But we've been going over that for the entire time. Yes?
I have a quick question.
Who is this?
This is Michael.
Okay, Michael.
Again, apologies because I wasn't in audio and MIDI 1. When you say write a piece, do you mean record 30 seconds or a 30-second piece?
Using, in MIDI, correct. No notation. We don't do notation.
Okay. Gotcha.
No, you'll record a MIDI piece using your sampler instruments, right? So all right, so let me show you what I mean. Hello, where's my dock? There we go. Okay, so let's mute this. Let's bring this down here. Let's bring this down here. So these are all muted. Do I have anything in here? Yeah, I'm not going to use that. So I've got this WDST chimes and then guitar sound design. Okay, so I'm going to record a piece here, and I'll get my click track going, and let's do this at we'll do something slow. It's 60 beats per second. And we'll have a 2-bar count off. Got a metronome on. We got a conductor on. 2, 3, and 4, and. All right, so that's my first track. Let me color code that. And then we've got our chimes. Let me play along and see what I get. Okay, so the first thing is that I don't like the attack and it's too bright. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to edit my sound. I'm going to add my filter back. No resonance, just make it a little darker. And here we go. Oh, it's so beautiful. And now we've got our oak piano. Okay, so what I need to do, I need to add some reverb. Now, I teach this a different way, but for right now, let me just insert the reverb. This is not how I work and not how I teach, but just because I want to do something really quickly for you. And I'm making a really ambient piece, so I'm going to have this be pretty wet. And let's 3 and 4 and. Okay, I didn't like that, right? So I'll just delete this and I'll pick it up from here. 2 and 3 and 4 and boom. And there's my little piece, right? Let's play it. If you'd have another track, because I want 4 tracks on yours. This needs to be color coded. going to add a little something else. Turn the count off, and just come in here. And that could be a piece. I mean, it doesn't have to be. You just have to do something to get back into making music in the computer. That's really what it's about. And for those of you that haven't really done this yet, to get started doing it. For me, let me talk to you about the benefits of this. Now, obviously, this is baby steps. This is the very basic, the basics of this. When sampling first started, I thought it was a joke, right? It was the 1980s, maybe 85 or 86. I felt pressured. I purchased something called the Ensoniq Mirage, which was an 8-bit sampler, and we're using 24-bit here. And it had, I probably told you this because I've been telling everybody this, but the screen on it was the size of the remote control, like the screen for all the information was this big. So like, you know, that's my thumb for comparison. And it had 2 digits on it, a letter and a number, and it was called hexadecimal programming language. And I definitely said this. It was really difficult to program. And it came with a library of sounds, and they were stored on floppy disks, and you could load one sound in at a time. And I had, a Juno 106, which I thought was a great synthesizer. I had a DX7, which I thought was a great synthesizer. You know, I had like instruments that I thought were really beautiful sounding. And then I had this 8-bit sampler, which it was okay, but it was just like every time I played a note, it was the same note over and over, the same performance. I could play it louder and softer, and I just didn't think it was a good medium for creating sounds. Fast forward to today, and sampling is the thing you hear the most. When you go to hear a film, almost, I'd say, like a significant, even if it sounds like an orchestra playing, a significant amount of the instruments are sampled and with live players added on top of it. A lot of pop music features sampling left and right, and Contact is the biggest sampler, and it's incredibly sophisticated, it's incredibly advanced, and the other things that you can do with the sound once it's inside of Contact are really profound. The way you can change the sound. And then when you add on top of that some of the sound design tools that are possible inside of a computer, and you can see that the world becomes the oscillator for your soundscapes, right? Because on a synthesizer, the tone generating unit is called an oscillator. My analog synths, of which I've got many over here and over there, they're all analog, and they've got voltage controlled oscillators that create timbres. Well, you're creating your own timbres digitally. So for example, if I were in Pro Tools, this is getting a little advanced, but I do want to just show you where this can go to. Also, before you hand this in, right, you'll want to get rid of all of these other tracks by right-clicking and then delete. Yes. And then you'll save the session as structure sampler, and then like maybe you'll add the word comp for composition, and then you'll have the original version with all those other tracks and this one, and this is what you would hand in to me, except it would have one more track. And that would be perfectly fine. All right, so, but let me just do this right now, and Command-Shift-N. One new stereo instrument track. And this is an instrument called Omnisphere by this company, Spectrasonics, right? This is an unbelievably deep sound creating device that's all made from samples. So, like, you can have something like this. Right? Acoustic bass, that's sampled. Like, they've got Marcus Miller's bass, electric bass. They've got John Patitucci's upright bass. Or you could right? That's all made from a cello. A string patch, right? I could boys choir. All sampled. Right, then they've got synth sounds. So all these sounds are sampled, and then what's really amazing about this is that it has all of these parameters that you can play around with, other things in the background, all these different filters. It's got envelopes, like complex envelopes, LFO envelopes. You can do sort of like this. You can add that, and then on, right, so you can just do all sorts of insane programming stuff here, and you can layer 4 different samples together to create one aggregate sound, and then it's got an amazing effects, like all sorts of stuff that you can put in line. And you know, this is where you can see the end result of learning all these basics. You can, if you take it out, and I'm going to be honest with you that there is, like, these sample companies, they have need for people that know how to edit and program samplers, and you know, there's a business opportunity for people that learn how to do this and learn how to do this really well, because all these companies have to constantly put out content in order to stay relevant. They have to put out new content constantly. People like Spitfire Audio, Output, Heaviosity, they constantly have to put out new content, and they need people that can edit and program samplers. And you know, I'm not saying it's high paying work, but it's certainly something you can do in home during COVID and when you don't have any gigs to go to, right? Okay, so we're going to spend a couple of minutes doing track organization. So this is a song from my, I think, 2015 album titled First Light. Let me just play a little bit of it for you. All right, so this is a piece that I released on an album. This is on the Spa channel on Sirius XM. It's been getting airplay since I released it. Very fortunate. And it's a combination of sampled instruments and live instruments. And I want to show you how I organized this track, all right? So typically with stuff like this, I like to why is this not working correctly? Gee, give me 1 second. Okay, great. I like to keep things with something like this that's orchestral, looking somewhat like a printed score. So what I've done here is the top two instruments are woodwinds, which you'd see in a printed score. So the first one is flute. Oh, that's not, it's being soloed. Give me 1 second. Where's the output for that? Ah. And yes, that's a live player. That's my friend Kathleen Nestor, who's in the New Jersey Symphony and has played Broadway. Amazing flutist. I've known her for 30 years. And this is another friend of mine, Julia DeRosa. She played oboe. And then, so what we're going over here is track organization. When you've got a large session, how to organize your tracks and everything. Okay, then below that, I've got voices. So this is sampled voices right here. And then doubling that, all these tracks here are a friend of mine named Joy. And if I just soloed that. And then blend the sampled sound with the live. And then I've got below that my pitched percussion. I've got glockenspiel. Tubular bell. Then some mallet rolls. And then I've got something called E-bow guitar, which is a little effect thingy. It's this little gizmo here. You float it on top of the guitar string so it touches it, and there's a magnetic field down there that excites the guitar string, and you get really crazy sounds with it. That's just over here. I like to play the whole thing. Right, it's really cool. Just a couple of notes here and there. And then I got a bunch of guitars here. And some of these are sampled and some of these are live. So I've got nylon string, I've got harmonics, and I've got 12 string. And there's a lot of delay going on. And then I've got the bass below that. Right. And then pianos. a lot of delay on this track. And then I've got a piano here which has no delay on it. And then I've got this right here, which is the celestes. These three green tracks are all different celestes with effects. And if you're listening with headphones and it's in stereo, you can hear it going back and forth. And notice with this whole session here that it's, except for, I don't know why this isn't the same color as this, because it's woodwinds. They should all be. But I've got stuff color coded, right? You can see as I go down, and I can just look, I know what things are by the colors. And then down here in the lower area here, I've got all my strings. And basically, these are three of my friends, four of my friends, actually. Right? And the three of them play violin and viola, and I overdub them. Right? And then that's doubled with sampled strings. Cello, live cello with sampled cellos. And then below that, I've got all my effects. So basically what I wanted to just show you here really quickly today, and this is a first foray into this, because I really want to make sure that you leave this semester understanding that your sessions should look nice and clean like this and organized, that anybody can walk in, open them up, and know what everything is. I'm missing markers on this for some reason. Sloppy on my part. But there's all sorts of other stuff, including routing and the different types of effects that I've added to this, and how that aggregates, the effects actually add to the composition, because the delay are creating counterpoint with my parts that I'm not playing, and I'm sort of reacting off of that. It's, it's a big part of what things I like to do when I write, is use the effect as a compositional tool and not just an echo. There has to be a purpose to the echo. And one of the purposes is to do kind of things that are a little bit like Steve Reich, minimalist music or systems music with them. And that's just sort of a concept I have, and it's not unique. I didn't invent it. I forget exactly where I got it from, but I definitely didn't invent it. But I've certainly co-opted it from my own creative juices. So anyway, at this point, we've been at this for a little over 2 hours now. We've gone through so much stuff, and I'm going to have to meet with some of you privately this week, which will add on to the time of the class. So I think at this point, if everybody's clear about what's due next week, right? 4 sampled instruments in structure and a short piece. And those 4 sampled instruments are to be taken from the sounds that you edited that you handed in today. And then while you're doing that, you're also going around and building up a library of sounds that you're recording, things in your apartment that you think might be interested. And just remember, when you're doing those recordings, you want things that have a pitch to them. You want to find things that actually have a pitch, that you can play on the keyboard. You want things that are percussive. You want things that might be cool, evolving pad sounds, things that might be interesting to play around with and sound design a little bit. So you want to keep those things in mind as you're listening to sounds in your environment, whether it's in your homes, your apartments, whether it's when you're walking outside, going for a run, or whether it's when you're commuting somewhere, and you're just capturing them and you're building up a library of sounds. You can use your phone. If you've got a USB microphone or our recording kits in your apartment, you can certainly start using those if you need help with setting those up. I've covered that with Recording Studio Fundamentals, but not with those of you that just took Audio MIDI 1. So I'll go over that. I'm going to make a little videotape of doing that, and I'll play that, and it'll be a little bit easier than me trying to move cameras around while we're in class here. and I can edit something together. So, yeah. Anyway, if there are any questions, I'd certainly, let's see.
Just a quick question.
Yes, Michael.
So, if we recorded and have a folder of the drum sounds that you gave us, like God Made Me Funky, those all, like, I assigned each of those a pitch. If I put that into structure, it's basically going to be the pitches I assign them, and then basically I can't play anything lower than that because it's just going to pitch it down. And
correct, and
really
it won't really be in time also when you because structure free doesn't have the contact will lock it to tempo no matter how you stretch it, which is really great. Structure free doesn't have that option. So basically you'll have a chromatic scale where you can play up the chromatic scale and it will play the loop, but you could play a different part, right? You can use each one of those as a kit, part of a kit, and you can reprogram the loop with your own, instead of it being boom, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, by boom, ba, 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 boom, boom, ba, ba. It might be, using those same sounds, but you've got them mapped chromatically up the keyboard. Yes, that's the standard way that, or all on the white keys some people do, but however you do it, it should be some sort of scale where they're interconnected.
And essentially it's just going to be, I mean, let's say I named it the first bass drum hit C3, B2 would be a lower bass drum hit, and then B flat 2, and then all right, thank you.
Right, but if there's any kind of rhythm in that sound, that would get out of tempo. So in other words, if you've captured a bass drum and a on one and a hi-hat on the end of one, as that gets pitched lower in structure, that gets out of time. It slows down.
I see.
And like what I said,
thank you.
Just to clarify, contact will keep that. There's a function in contact where you can keep that locked to tempo, within a certain interval. Like if it gets too far out, it sounds funny, but it basically works pretty well. Great. That's a good question. All right, everyone. So have fun. I will edit this video and get it up on YouTube in a couple days, and go. I'll look at your sample edits on Saturday morning and get you some feedback. And it will probably, I'll just give you feedback. The grade will be for what you hand in next week. In other words, it's a 2-part assignment. I'll give you feedback on what you've done and mark that you've handed it in. And then next week, when you hand in your little piece with your 4 sampler instruments and your little composition, the whole aggregate of both weeks will be what I grade. So with no further ado, I will catch you guys all next week. Have a great weekend, and enjoy the cooler weather after the monsoon yesterday. Yeah. All right. Talk to you soon, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.